A Winter Love Song by Rita Bradshaw, read by Barrie. This book is in memory of my wonderful, sweet, comical, beautiful, and utterly loving furry baby Meg. 7.5 years weren't nearly long enough, precious little girl, and they've left me heartbroken. But they were perfection, and your devotion to me was so unique and so special it can never be replaced. You were so much more than a dog in your capacity for immense love and understanding, and that waggy little tail had a language all of its own. Muffin misses you, Dad misses you, and I physically ache all the time for you. You were loved beyond words, and you were more precious than silver and gold, as I told you every day of your life. Acknowledgements. As ever, realms of research for this story, but special mention to Fairfield Folk by Frances Brown, Louisa's Fairground Life and Beyond by Louisa M. Presney, Voices from the Fairground, Leicesterdike Local History Group, Jungle Warfare by J.P. Cross, Some Sunny Day, My Autobiography by Dame Vera Lynn, War Diary, Marshall Cavendish Books. Preface. He wasn't going to be able to fight his way out of this. He could read it in their eyes that he was a goner, but he was damned if he'd make it easy for them. He didn't want to die, but if the price of staying alive meant beating that young lad to a pulp, it was too high. He watched them as they edged up the stairs. And strangely, the crippling fear that had gripped him all night was gone. He'd brought this on himself. There was no one else to blame. He'd been such a fool. It was the thought of leaving his little lass that was crucifying, as he waited for them to make their move. He hadn't had the chance to say goodbye, to tell her he loved her, and that she was his sun, moon, and stars, and now it was too late. What would she think? What would she do? And then they were on him, and he could hear Mrs. Walton in the background screaming and wailing like a banshee. Part 1. John, 1928. Chapter 1. Now, Bonnie, I'm going to ask you something, and I think you know what I'm going to say. Did you kick your grandma like she said? The small black-haired girl standing in front of the big thick-set man, whose upper arms were the width of her waist, eyed him without fear. "Aye, da." John Lindsay closed his eyes for a moment. "Why, Hinny? Why did you do that?" "Because she's cruel. She kicked one of Miss Nelly's dogs. The new one she's still training, just because it cocked its leg up the wagon steps. So I kicked her. It yelped, the poor thing, and it was limping when it ran off. Me grandma deserved it, and I hate her." It wasn't the first time the child had expressed such sentiments. John crouched down in front of his daughter, and if he had spoken what was in his heart, he would have said he agreed with the child's summing up of the woman who was the bane of his life. Instead, he gently said, "Two wrongs don't make a right, lass. You know that, don't you? And she's got a big bruise on her shin." Bonnie stared at her father. She wanted to say that she was glad about the bruise, but she knew that would upset her da. But she didn't understand why he always stuck up for her grandma. Well, not always, she corrected herself, but a lot of the time. And yet her da didn't like her grandma any more than she did. She knew this to be true, even though her da had never said such a thing, the same way as she knew her grandma hated her da, even when she was being civil to him. "I think you ought to go and say you're sorry, Hinny, don't you?" As soon as the words had left his lips, John knew he should have put it differently rather than inviting her opinion. Sure enough, Bonnie glared at him. "No, I don't. She's nasty, spiteful.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?